Hey guys, Mana here, and as you can probably tell, it's still pretty bad. This is going to be More Dots episode 11, and I'll continue recording when it's not this terrible. Okay, so as you can probably tell now, it's no longer that terrible. So yeah, I'm gonna get right into this episode. There's basically a whole lot of stuff to talk about, but the main thing I'm gonna be discussing is how are warlocks doing in Firelands. Now this question will take a while, so you might want to grab a little snack. You know, you might want to take a quick shower before or after, depending on how you see the world. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. So yeah, let's go. Right away, I don't think Tier 12 Firelands it's probably not as good of a tier for Warlocks as Tier 11 was. Those are just my initial thoughts after seeing every fight on normal mode. Although part of that is probably because Tier 11 had a lot more bosses. Tier 11 just had a lot of fights that really let Warlocks shine, I think. And with Tier 12, I just don't get that same feeling. You know, Warlocks, they tend to really shine in multi-target fights with medium to heavy movement. Obviously, zero movement is optimal, but since other classes tend to suffer more from movement, it basically just lets Warlocks shine above them in that sense. As for AoE, it really just depends on how the fight is designed, but Demonology was absolutely amazing on Maloriak. No one can argue that. But as for Tier 12, I guess just the best way to go through this is just to go one by one through each boss and just analyze how Warlocks do on each one. So yeah, that's basically where I'm going to be going now. Alright, so first up is Shanix. So Shanix it's interesting because I feel like on normal mode it's really good for Warlocks, but it's nowhere near that good on Heroic. This probably just depends on your strategy, so I'll just go over how we do it. For normal mode, we basically just kill Rage Face right away, and then actually, I'm not sure how we did it last time on normal mode. I know we've done it at least two different ways with success. One of the ways is to DPS Shanix after Rage Face down to like 35%, and then we kill Riplum, and then we go back to Shanix. Or after Rage Face dies, we split DPS between Shanix and Riplum, and then as Riplum dies, Shanix will hit 35%, and then we just kill Shanix. But either way, this doesn't really matter for the Warlock because for the Warlock, all you really care about is that you have three big targets with a ton of health, so you can DPS three targets at once, and that's just amazing for Warlocks. Yeah, so normal mode Shanix is really good for Warlocks in that sense. On the other hand, on heroic mode, this doesn't really apply, at least not to us, not to our guild anyway, because we completely ignore Rage Face and Riplim for the DPS anyway. So a Warlock's multi-dot potential, a Warlock's multi-dot damage is worthless on this fight because there's really no reason to go about going out of your way to DPS Rage Face and Riplim. We can just be on Shanix and that'll help the raid a lot more. So even though you could multi-dot on heroic difficulty, it's more often than not just a waste of time, and you're just doing it to pad your DPS meters for no reason. So yeah, it's not as good on heroic mode, but it's still not really that bad. All right, so next up is Lord Rylith. This fight's pretty chaotic. There's a lot of stuff happening all the time. I'm sure most of you have seen it by now. Um, it's pretty hectic, but really there's only three main things that you have to actually care about as a warlock in terms of targets. There's the sparks, which deal AOE damage. You kind of want to stay away from them, and they have to be focused on pretty quickly. There's the fragments, which need to be AOE'd, and then there's the legs, which I guess that's two things, but whatever, we'll just count it as one. Um, and as a warlock, you're basically going to have one of two main tasks. You're either going to be helping with the AoE on the fragments, or you're going to be killing the spark. Both assignments include DPSing the legs if you're good, which you really should just be dotting up both legs. This might be different on 10-man, but I would assume it's very similar. Even for whatever reason you have to kill the spark and help the AoE, that's actually not that bad since, well, you do more damage that way. So I was actually going to say that this isn't really a good fight for Warlocks, but honestly, like, I can't find a reason why that would be the case. I mean, this is a pretty damn good fight. I mean, you got the two legs that you can DPS, and sure, they don't take that much damage, but they're still there. There's the spark, which it doesn't die that quickly either. And then on heroic mode, at least, the AOE is really good. I mean, they don't die that they have plenty of health, so you can really get in there and AOE them. So yeah, it's a pretty good fight for Warlocks, especially Demonology on heroic mode, I would say. Alright, so Bethtelek, the big ass spider boss. This one really just comes down to what your guild assigns you to. Personally, I think that the ideal job for a warlock is to DPS the spinners and then DPS the drone once spinners are dead. You could have a demo lock on spiderlings, but personally, I don't really think that the AoE is. I'm just not convinced that it's that good. I've had limited experience with it, so take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, if you are assigned to spinners and drones like I am, you really should do pretty well on the DPS. Although I've been doing less damage recently, which pretty much just led me to the conclusion that the better your guild gets, the less damage you'll do. So for instance, while I'm on spinners, I have an arcane mage helping me as well as a paladin taunting them down. The better they get at killing the spinners, the worse I'm gonna do. And it's even worse if I start dotting one up and then the arcane mage just instantly goes and kills it. That's pretty bad for my DPS, but yeah. Of course, that doesn't really mean that warlocks are bad on this fight. Ultimately, damage meters don't really serve a huge purpose when everyone is good and doing their job correctly. It's just something to keep in mind, I guess. So let's see, what else can I say about Bethtelek? Well, this is one fight where the 30-second cooldown on Soul Swap actually really annoys me. Because you can just dot up the spinner so much quicker if you had a 15-second Soul Swap. Also, if your guild has a Destruction Warlock, he or she could be the one to initiate the pull, like we do in our guild, because you can actually Bane of Havoc the boss, and everything that Warlock does on the bottom is going to hurt her on top. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Bethtelek. I feel like I'm forgetting something though, but I guess not. I guess that's pretty much it. Alright, next up is Alice Razor, or Alice Resort, and I actually have no idea how to say it correctly. This is probably the most fun boss fight that I've done in a really long time, although that mostly has to do with flying and then dodging tornadoes, so if you're not doing that, it might not be as fun. But anyway, I find that if you're really good on this fight, and you can manage your spells correctly while flying very quickly, and going through all the rings, and if you can really stack your cooldowns and nail every dot refresh at the perfect moment, well, you're still never going to be as good as a fire mage, so yeah, screw you, I guess. That being said, there's really not a whole lot to talk about on this fight. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty gimmicky. If you're in the air, you just maintain your spell priority as best you can while going through the rings, and if you're on the ground, you should pretty much just be helping with whatever needs the most help. Let's Resort, it's really straightforward, so yeah, there's nothing much to say. Again, on normal mode, I haven't done it on heroic yet. Oh yeah, and to anyone that is still struggling with tornadoes, I'm sure there's plenty of video guides on it explaining what you do. But in case anyone still needs help, what I do is you follow a tornado, and then when one passes you, you turn around and follow that tornado. So you're basically going to be running around in circles, and you should really easily be able to get through that phase with that. Also, if Alice Razor flies near you, you can still attack her during the tornado phase. So yeah, that's just a little bit more damage that way. All right, next up is Balrog or Balrog. I actually have no idea why all these names are so annoying to pronounce. But unlike Alice Razor or Alice Razor, God, this one is probably my least favorite fight of the tier because it's really boring. Even if you're assigned to take a crystal and move a little bit, it's still such a patchwork fight. You have to do almost nothing. For DPS, I think healers, they have a much more interesting job. But anyway, I think Demonology is probably the best spec for this fight since there's really almost no movement. And it's extremely easy to stack your cooldowns together because there's like no mechanics to really watch out for. So yeah, besides that, what else can I say? There's really not a whole lot. I mean, Affliction can't really abuse multi-dotting, and Destro can't use Bane of Havoc. So yeah, I guess I'm done talking about Balrog because there's really nothing else to say. Heroic mode might be more interesting, I suppose, but that'll be another day. Alright, next up is Staghelm, and this one is a lot more interesting than Balrog, mechanically speaking, although that really isn't saying much because Balrog is boring as hell. But anyway, this fight, in terms of like its own mechanics, it's not really good for Warlocks again. There really isn't any multi-dotting here. There's an ad sometimes, when he jumps in cat form, but the melee can kill that so quickly in just a couple global cooldowns. That's how it's done in our group. So yeah, the ads, you don't even want to dot them up because they die so quickly. Warlocks can still do well in other ways, particularly with the mechanics, and that's really just thanks to teleport, really. You can teleport out of groups really quickly, and if you soul burn, you can run back really quickly too. So yeah, you should be using that whenever possible. But really, besides that, I can't. There's really nothing for me to talk about. Maybe you guys can ask me some questions about Staghelm that could let me elaborate. But besides that, I have nothing to say about this fight. All right, finally there is Ragnaros. Now, there's actually a whole lot to talk about in this fight for mechanics. I feel like the mechanics really appeal to Warlocks. But performance-wise, I don't think that we're really up there just yet. Um, there's a lot of stuff to say that makes Warlocks amazing, but I guess I'll just go over all the phases in order so that I can talk about how Warlocks do on this fight. All right, so phase one, you'll pretty much just be burning rag with some very minor movement. Depending on your raid setup, you might be assigned to trigger traps, in which case you'll be doing less DPS, but obviously your task is more important, so it's fine to do less. Yeah, then for the first intermission, there's going to be a bunch of ads. As Affliction, Destruction, Demonology, you'll be doing similar things, just putting Unstable Affliction or Immolate, and then Corruption on all the ads. If you're Destruction, you can also use Conflag, that'll do a nice little burst damage. And then Demonology, you can also use Axe Toss for a quick stun, and you can be pretty clutch with that. But yeah, that pretty much does it for the first intermission phase and for phase one. Okay, so moving on to phase two. It's pretty similar to phase one, except that there's also going to be AoE that you have to do, when you move in for the seeds. And during that AoE, I think that that's basically when Destruction tends to fall behind. Although I haven't used Destruction and haven't seen anyone use Destruction for this fight. At least I don't think so. I'd have to actually go back and check. But yeah, anyway, for the AoE, you'll pretty much, as Destruction, be using Shadow Flame and Shadow Fury. I'm not really sure if it's worth it to use Rain of Fire. I really don't know. I think that the ads can die quickly enough that a Shadow Flame and a Shadow Fury should be just enough for you to do some quick bursts to them. Yeah. Affliction and Demonology shouldn't have any problem with AoE. Demonology especially not. Fellstorm, Shadow Flame, Hellfire, maybe even Immolate Aura, I don't know. There's just so much AoE that Demo can do. Affliction, just Shadow Flame and a Soulburn instead of Corruption, and you'll do quite well with that. Okay, so finally for Phase 3, there really isn't a whole lot that's really going on here for the Warlock. You're just going to be DPSing Rag. You're going to be moving for some things, but really you don't get hurt by movement that much. If Meteor's on you, you're just going to want to go to the designated spot, and you're going to try to not screw anyone up. And pretty much just right before it hits you, I tend to just Fell Flame it because I think it's the quickest thing you can do to damage it. You're going to want to watch out for Shadow Flames, though. I found this out the hard way. Don't use Shadow Flame if you're at risk of hitting a Meteor, even if it's your Meteor. You don't want to do that because you'll end up just hitting someone else's Meteor, or something bad's going to happen. So yeah, so just watch out for Shadow Flames during that last phase. And lastly, for Affliction and Demonology, watch your movement. You don't want to be moving too much more than you actually have to, because you're going to be sacrificing a ton of damage because it's your execute phase. So yeah, that's pretty much Rag. It's not really a bad fight, but it's also not a great fight, for Warlocks anyway. I feel like that the mechanics really do benefit Warlocks, though. I feel like the amount of movement is just right for any Warlock spec, even Demonology. You can always do something during that movement, so it doesn't really hurt Warlocks that much, especially if you compare Warlocks to some other classes that really get hurt by that amount of movement. So overall, I would say that Firelands is not a bad tier for Warlocks at all. We don't dominate it, and there aren't really any fights that I can look at and say, yeah, this is gonna be a sick fight for me. Like there were a couple of fights, several fights back in tier 11 where I felt like Warlocks should be on top no matter what, even if they weren't. This tier doesn't really give me that feeling that much at all, which isn't really a problem. I don't think that it's good. It's a good thing for any class to dominate a tier. And as far as I know, there is no one class that dominates Firelands, except maybe Mages. But yeah, all in all, Warlocks, they don't really dominate Firelands, like I said. But there doesn't seem to be a reason for a raid leader to not want a Warlock. You're always going to want Warlocks. We're pretty sick. Alright, now that I'm completely done with Firelands and all this stuff, I got a couple other questions. They're all kind of different, I guess. Alright, so right away, the first one is, what spec should I use? Now, I've talked about this a lot before. I've always said that you should use whichever one you enjoy using the most, and this is still pretty true today. I mean, the three specs are all pretty close. Destruction is a little bit behind Affliction and Demonology, but it's not that far behind. So if you're not really in a hardcore progression-oriented guild, you can still use Destruction. It's not really a bad spec. Otherwise, I would definitely recommend using Affliction and Demonology. And you know what? I would recommend using them anyway. You know, if you've never tried Demonology or Affliction or Destruction, you know, try it. You know, you should try all your specs. They're all fun. All right, next question. How do Warlocks scale with gear? I'm not really sure how in-depth I want to go into this answer right now. I'll just say that we scale really well, especially Demonology. Demonology scales really, really well with gear. I might go over this more in the future, you know, a lot more in-depth, but for now, that's pretty much all you really need to know. All right, next question is actually from someone that's in my guild. He's asking me, will your videos ever have multiple perspectives like the top-end guilds? I've thought about this, and I don't think so, because I kind of want to do videos from a Warlock's point of view to kind of show other Warlocks what they can do. And unless I'm showing multiple Warlock perspectives, I don't think that could work. So yeah, maybe if you guys want to see some stuff like that, I can work something out. But otherwise, it'll probably just be from my own point of view. All right, next question. Has your UI changed at all since your UI guide? I'm not really using any new add-ons, but I've added some stuff next to my need-to-know bars that basically just lets me track cooldowns a lot better. It especially helps with Demonology. It's really good for that. But yeah, nothing really major. Lastly, how long does it take to get the Legendary Staff? I think it's something around, I think it's like 3 weeks for each tier. I'm not really sure though. I haven't gotten the first tier yet. I'm almost there though. But yeah, I think it's something like maybe 9 to 10 weeks. I might be wrong on that though. And that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. I'm sorry I had it out later than usual. Again, all this friggin' background noise has delayed me a lot. I can't control the outside world, so yeah, screw those guys. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say. Oh no, yeah, follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/MaanaWoW. And of course, if you guys enjoyed what you saw, feel free to like and to subscribe. Later, guys.